that are related to children exposed to violence, but might not otherwise be able to be tapped. So again, thinking strategically about how you can knit together or braid these different sources of funding to address those issues of fragmentation that often make it difficult to be comprehensive in your efforts. Now, as opposed to braiding, a second strategy is to blend your funding sources, which means to pool funds together. And this is obviously more difficult because it often means finding ways to either renegotiate or remove the categorical requirements that create more fragmented services. But I think it's important to think about at least these two strategies because, again, that I think there's sometimes a tendency for an initiative to recreate program silos just simply one level higher. So instead of programmatic or service silos, there's now the initiative silo. And when you think about blending and braiding funding, it forces you to think about how do you connect with other related services, other related initiatives that might not be focused primarily on children exposed to violence, but could be potential sources of support where you could either braid or better coordinate your resources, or if it's possible, pool your resources to make them more flexible. Another example of creating flexibility is negotiating memorandums of understanding to redirect savings. So, for example, the Baltimore site, the Urban Health Initiative, negotiated an MOU with the city government to be able to redirect savings from their programs if they could prove that they were reducing costs. So if they were reducing the number of children in out-of-home placements or the number of children in foster care, they could then redirect the savings that they were able to quantify towards more front-end and preventive programs, again, to save money longer term. So the fifth and final strategy, which is also the most difficult one, is to create new revenue or new dedicated sources of funding. And I think that this is challenging in this current economy, but it's still something to consider because there are a variety of ways that you can approach that. So one way would be to look at fee-for-service strategies to generate additional revenue. So some programs use a sliding fee scale to generate additional revenue. Also looking at unrelated business income. So again, this relates to maximizing your resources. So looking for opportunities to do things like rent out unused space to generate additional money. Getting an agreement from the local government to rent out an unused office and provide a portion of the rent to the initiative. So those kinds of ways to build up additional revenue. And again, this can be challenging to do, but I think it's much easier, again, if you're taking this strategic approach and asking what resources are out there that aren't necessarily being used that we could potentially tap into. Fundraising is another example. So holding annual fundraising events is often a way to brand your initiative, to pull in additional partners, and also obviously generate revenue. And also remember to look at current fundraising efforts, so you're not reinventing the wheel, and see if there are opportunities to partner with those coalitions or organizations and then share the revenues from the fundraising events, and so that way you don't have to invent something whole cloth. More difficult are things like using new taxing mechanisms. So a common approach is to use sales tax as a source of funding for children and families programs, and some localities have actually been able to pass ballot measures that use different forms of taxes, so alcohol, tobacco taxes are another example of that. Denver was able to pass a local sales tax and then use that revenue to support children and families programs. And there are other examples from around the country, but that's a way to generate revenue at the grassroots, as opposed to having a statewide campaign or a more ambitious approach that you just focus on potential revenue sources that you can create at the community level through those types of mechanisms. Other examples would be casino revenue. So there have been some localities that have negotiated to have a percentage of gross casino revenues redirected or set aside for children and family programs. Many communities have children's funds that get contributed to by a variety of different sources that you might be able to tap into, or if you don't have a children's fund, thinking about how you could work with other stakeholders to create a broader children's fund that would provide support for kids and families programs in general, a portion of which would then be devoted to your initiative. So again, thinking beyond just children exposed to violence and the stakeholders that are involved and the services involved with those issues, to think about how you could connect with those other coalitions, other initiatives, and potentially draw on their support to generate new or additional revenue. Now, the fourth principle of sustainability. So actually, let me take a second. So that was a fair amount of ground to cover. So questions about the 5 different financing strategies.
Jarle, just to come in for a second. I know there was some that joined later on. I just wanted to remind everybody that the phones are unmuted and can remain unmuted, and you can speak and kind of comment or ask questions as you would like. So I just had to make that clear again.
Okay. All right, well, why don't we continue moving through the principles and then wrap up with looking at how to create a strategic financing plan, and then we can see if there are any questions at the end. All right, so yes, question?
I have one question. This is Stephanie from Boston, and
okay.
Those are really helpful in sort of framing it. Would you think that this is something, and you might be getting to this nearer the end, that we would sort of incorporate into a strategic plan of things that we would, it's almost like these are ongoing activities in order to continue to sustain financing. So it's almost like it'd be woven through your strategic plan.
You mean connecting with related initiatives and programs?
Yeah, the related initiatives, some of the connecting to different diverse stakeholders, things like that.
Yes, and that's part of the process of developing a strategic financing plan, is making sure that you're really looking at the big picture of those stakeholders and sources that you could connect with. Because again, I think that there's sometimes a tendency to get initiative-itis, right? That you're just focused on your initiative, and there are other coalitions, other initiatives that might be related and might be potential partners, but aren't dealing with children exposed to violence as their primary issue. And so I think, again, casting a broad net to identify those opportunities to potentially embed your services, your programs, your strategies into related efforts, instead of just basically seeing your initiative as the one comprehensive umbrella that has to do all the work.
Okay, thank you.
All right. So fourth principle of sustainability, again, is building that support from diverse stakeholders.